Woke up to a man prowling my property at 4 a.m. Hi all, long-time reader, first-time poster. I never thought I had something hit so close to home to me. For some context now, I live in a small Caribbean island in a middle-class neighborhood with my wife and 2-year-old daughter. My townhouse is located in a quiet cul-de-sac. On one side of the house is the main street and a shared driveway. On the other side is a very private courtyard completely out of sight from the road, which is shared with 2 other townhouses that are very isolated. Beyond the courtyard is overgrown bush and an abandoned house under construction with boarded-up windows. This house almost sits on top of the courtyard and just has a bad vibe all the time. All my windows face the courtyard, the bush, and the abandoned house. There are many nights I'll be playing PS4 and just catch a weird vibe that someone was watching me from the bush. I eventually got black curtains, but could still feel eyes on my back. Like whoever it was could see the illumination from the TV and know I was awake. Things got real about 3 weeks ago. My daughter started going to school in April, and my wife is staying at home, so they're usually home during the day while I am at work. I work a 9 to 5. It was a Wednesday morning, and my wife asked if I could drop her and my daughter to a nearby mall to do some shopping on my way to work. I picked them up around 11 a.m., dropped them home, and quickly headed back to the office. Around 12:30 p.m., while my wife was in the kitchen, one of my neighbors started pounding on our door. My next-door neighbor across the courtyard had just come home, walked around by her very isolated back door, and found that someone had broken the glass door on their patio facing the bush. I rushed home to check the scene out, and we waited for the police. We had no idea who it was. All we knew is that the break-in occurred between 10 a.m. and 12 p.m., while everyone's cars were gone. My wife is usually home at this time, but this day she was out. What bothers me was that the houses are built the same way, with the same doors. I was properly creeped out at this point, and asked my wife to not open the blinds and curtains so wide while she was home alone. A week passed by and everything seems normal again, or as normal as can be. The incident is still in our minds all the time, but we get on with life. Another week passes by and it's a Tuesday night. I was awake playing this game called Fortnite until 1:30 a.m. I decided it was getting late and headed downstairs for a snack, came back up and laid down reading the sub before I drifted up. I remember around 2 a.m. in the morning, I heard what sounded like 3 bangs that made me pause. I told myself it was the wind, but when I looked outside, the night was deadly quiet. It wasn't windy at all. I remember checking every window and even turning off the fans in the house so I could hear more clearly. The voice in my head kept saying that those bangs sounded human. It sounded like someone was doing something, but I couldn't see anything and drifted off to sleep again. Around 3:45 a.m., I was awoken by the neighbor's dogs across from my driveway on the main street barking. I usually would just go back to sleep, but my body shot up and I felt cold. I rushed to the window facing the doorway and saw a tall Rasta man pulling the door handles on all the cars. I wanted to shout at him in my accent, "Yo, what the fuck y'all doing? Get the fuck out of here!" But again, I paused. As he walked away down the street, I realized he was holding a machete. That night, I couldn't get back to sleep. I called the police to inform them what I saw, but they never came. The next morning on a Wednesday, I messaged all my neighbors to let them know what I saw the night before. Everyone was on edge that morning, wondering what the fuck was going on. My neighbor with the dogs has surveillance cameras facing my driveway and actually caught the prowler as he moved around the houses, checking windows, doors, cars, confirming what I had seen. He had disappeared in the courtyard out of sight for a while that night. I left for work at 9 a.m. The last thing I told my wife was to close the blinds a bit more. I just had a weird vibe coming from the bushes. Around 10:30 a.m., I received a call from my wife. I stupidly canceled it and tried video calling her back to chat with my daughter. She ended it immediately, and a call came through again. This time I answered, and it's like everything in my world stopped. She was whispering and in tears. She sounded very scared. All I heard was, "There's a man beating the door down right now in the courtyard." My fucking phone battery died at this point. I was in a state of panic. I rushed to my car and flew home in under 10 minutes. I pulled into the courtyard area so damn hard and fast and ran into the middle cursing that this shit cannot be happening again. Fortunately, the man had not broken down my door, but my neighbor's door again. It was smashed. I wasn't even expecting what happened next. I thought the man was in and out. The same Rasta man I saw at 4 a.m. came flying out the door with a large knife, hopped over a fence and ran through the bushes, collecting a backpack he had stashed away. After the police arrived and neighbors up the hill came out, we all started talking, and a picture of what happened that morning became clear. My neighbor who lives up the hill from us saw a man enter my neighbor's yard and walk to the back door after she left for work. He then watched as the man hammered and chiseled out a door with a deadbolt. He called the police with the hopes they'd come and catch him. That didn't happen. The man chiseled out the door for 15 minutes. This time my wife was in the kitchen and was hearing hammering and couldn't see him as he was in a blind spot from our home. She went to check in the living room by the courtyard and heard our back door knob start violently shaking. She ran back to the kitchen and the noise had stopped. When she looked through the courtyard window, a man was staring right back at her. He then proceeded to my neighbor's other glass door, and in one hit, he was inside. My wife ran upstairs with my daughter and locked herself in the bedroom and called me. The police took over 30 minutes to show up that morning, and my wife refuses to go back to the house, as most days she's the only one in the cul-de-sac, while everyone is out. We were renting the place, so she packed all our belongings, and we are currently in temporary accommodation looking for another home that isn't so isolated. Gotta get a dog as well. When we moved to stay in the house with her, she says the man is still out there, and she feels like he will come back for her one morning if we don't move. Am I crazy? Hey there, Reddit. I need a little help with this one, I think my imagination is running wild. I'm 22 years old, and female if it matters. I recently moved into my tiny one-bedroom flat in April of this year. It's 5 minutes away from where I live with my parents. I know the area quite well, and felt it was a good area to try living on my own, before committing to a mortgage. The building I live in is set out oddly. It is comprised of 8 flats. I'm basically in the middle of one below, above, and one either side of me. Pros, don't have to use my heating much. Cons, noise, lots of it. And being unable to install my new dance pole. 'Cause, neighbors. The flat to my left was vacant until the beginning of the week, which brings me to my story. At the beginning of the week in which I moved in, I heard large amounts of banging coming from the living room wall. I naturally made the assumption that it was no longer empty. It was only yesterday I had the displeasure of physically meeting my new neighbor. I'm currently studying to be a nurse, and due to breaking my foot, I work long friggin' hours to catch up and graduate with my class. I just returned home from the hospital and got out of my car to walk down the small flight of stairs to my gate. Being a beautiful day, my new neighbor Paul was sitting outside his front door with his brother and nephews. His eyes lit when he saw me, and he introduced himself with enthusiasm. I returned to the introduction to be polite, and he asked me about the neighbors in the block. Being that I don't know them, I told him what little I knew and made a move to go to my door. The following conversation occurred. Is your flat as small as mine then? Well, yeah, I can hardly fit in it, let alone anyone else. At this point, Paul's brother pulls out the waistband of his joggers and mutters something along the lines of, well, if you can't fit in there, I'm sure I can fit in here. He grinned at me with rows of rotting teeth. I held my vomit well, Reddit. At this point, I wasn't exactly sure of what I heard, so rather than calling him out on something my deaf ears might have not picked up correctly, I chose to let it slide. Well, I'm not planning on living here much longer. I need somewhere bigger. Why do you need somewhere bigger if you live on your own? To be honest, I don't plan on living alone for much long. Paul at this point runs his eyes to my head, to my toes, stopping far too long on my chest. Well, I'm sure I can help you out with that. You're hot. Is the view from your, bedroom window the same as mine? Maybe I can come in and check. At this point, I'm breaking it. There's 2 grown men taller and broader than me, on God knows what, who could easily overpower me. I just had to note the fuck out of there and back into my flat. And what the fuck? Their eyes made track marks, they had rotting teeth, and pinpoint pupils. No thank you, I'm leaving now. I turned and got through my gate, which Paul complimented. I told him it's for keeping reprobates out my property. He called me hot again, and I slammed the door and locked it behind me. For the next few hours, I was double and triple checking that I actually locked it and not imagined it. I settled around dinner time, but then heard my gate move, and my door handle moving up and down twice. I froze. It was like someone had poured ice down my back. Whoever it was left quickly towards the direction of his front door. I spent most of last night awake in my bed, terrified to move just in case whoever it was came back. Unfortunately, my new pole got delivered today while I was on shift. According to UPS, Paul was more than happy and enthusiastic to take it in. No doubt of what it was that the company has plastered all over the box. I went to retrieve it, keys slotting between my fingertips just in case. He tried to take it to my flat, but I swiped it off him, hoisted it up my shoulders, and promptly told him I could handle it. He looked shocked, as he could barely lift it off the floor. Yes, dude, I may look like a chunky monkey, but I'm built under it. I locked myself in again. But as it's been another beautiful day, I decided to sit out front with a book and my iPod. Bad idea. Paul then sat outside my front on the glass and stared at me until I went inside. Took my washing in early, as no way was I leaving my expensive pants outside. The only floor they are gracing is mine. So Reddit, that's my story so far. What's the verdict? Am I crazy? Creep at the library. Okay, so I'm currently a 20-year-old female college student. I'm at the end of my 3rd semester, and that of course means I have a shit ton of assignments to do for all my classes. Fun. I'm also a major procrastinator, which makes it even more fun. This also means that I spend a majority of my weekends camped out at the library near my house, working on homework for hours and hours and hours. I've been doing since last semester, too. I get easily distracted when I'm at my house, which is why I go to the library so much, as more of a sit your ass down and do your work environment. Anyways, on to the story. Like I said before, I've been spending hours at the library doing homework since last semester. This is where the first encounter took place. One Saturday, at the end of April of this year, I was at the library working on homework. I was extremely stressed out since I had so many assignments to do and wasn't in the mood to talk to or deal with anyone else. I just wanted to get my work done. After a few minutes of being at the library, I noticed him. There was a guy around my age, walking up and down the book aisles that were right next to where I was seated. Out of the corner of my eye, I could see him watching me. I shrugged it off and went back to work. About 10 minutes later, he approached me. He stood right next to my table and just stared at me. I took out one of my headphones and glared up at him. "Can I help you?" I asked in a rather pissed off tone. He started stuttering and mumbled something. I think he was asking how my day was. I told him I was busy and he walked off. Okay, weird, but at least he left. Well, I thought he left. He ended up coming back about 15 minutes later and proceeded to do the same thing. He just stood by my table and fucking stared at me. I was tired of this and just really wanted this guy to leave me alone so I could do my work. I took out my headphones once again and asked him what he wanted. "What's your name?" he asked. "I'm not gonna tell you my name," I responded. This is when he got angry. "Why not?" he asked, his voice growing louder. I glared up at him and responded with, "Because I don't know you." At this point, the guy at the table next to me had noticed something was up. He didn't say anything, but began glaring at him too. I don't know if this is what made the guy back off or not, but after that he instantly calmed down, mumbled some kind of an apology and walked off. At this time, I was constantly having anxiety and panic attacks due to all the stress in which I was under. I ended up going home and having an anxiety attack right after this incident. I also told my friend about this encounter a few days later in class, but he said that the guy was probably just trying to flirt with me and just really sucked at it. I agreed with him, but still made sure to be on the lookout for this guy every time I went to the library after this. I didn't see him and eventually ended up forgetting about the whole incident, at least until today. Flash forward 7 months later to today. I'm near the end of my 3rd semester and have a huge research paper due in a couple of days that I, of course, have procrastinated on. I went to the library today, sat down at a table and began doing my work. About 20 minutes into doing my work, I noticed a guy walk up to my table and stare at me. I looked up and the guy proceeded to mumble that he liked my hat and walked off. That's when I remembered that it was the same guy as before. Fuck! I made sure he wasn't anywhere near me before going back to my work. I know, I should have moved spots, but the library was packed, and there weren't any more open tables for me to sit at anyways. Now what made the situation a little worse is that the guy ended up sitting at the table right across from mine. However, it seemed like he was captivated in his own work too, so I thought once again, brushed off his weird awkward flirting, and went back to doing my own thing. About an hour later, he came up to my table again. "What's your name?" he asked. I said the same exact thing that I'd said the last time, that I wasn't going to tell him my name and that I was busy. He mumbled an apology again, and then asked me where I got my hat. I said I didn't remember and he walked off. Now, I would have ignored all of this and just chalked it up to him being really awkward and bad at flirting. I'm introverted and awkward, so I get it. However, right before he started to leave the library, I began hearing the clicking of a camera. Out of the corner of my eye, I looked towards him, and from what I saw, it looked like his phone was pointed directly at me. I instantly got creeped out, and my voice got stuck in my throat. I know I should have said something, but I froze. The guy then grabbed his stuff and left. Even after he was gone, I couldn't focus on my work anymore, and ended up going home. I can't say for sure that this guy was taking pictures of me, but from what I saw, he was. Thankfully, school ends soon, so I won't be going to the library as much anymore until the new semester starts. I also start carrying pepper spray and being more aware of my surroundings. Hopefully, I won't have to run into this guy again. I've never been very good with boys, but this only made it worse. I'll start off by saying that I am a lesbian, but only had my moment of profound clarity in college, though in a lot of ways, it should have been so obvious, mostly for the aforementioned reason in the title I'm terrible at being with anything other than friends with boys, and this was painfully obvious during my high school years, back in 2002 to 2006, though this story took place during my senior year specifically. However, I wasn't the type to lead boys on when they were interested. I did it briefly, but they always burned out within a week or so. Never was comfortable with making any type of physical contact with them. To the story though, there was a boy in my same grade, Mark, and he was a bit socially awkward. Not that I wasn't. I did have a varied amount of clique friends though, but he was in the other ways. He had a strange disrespect for personal space, unwanted physical contact, and even when he did speak to people, he was more than a bit brisk. I first became aware of his feelings for me in the first half of my senior year, if I recall correctly. It was around the time of the Renaissance Festival in our area, and he and I had struck up a loose conversation in a group of like 4 others if we were going or not. I never been before, but wanted to, and he mentioned that he was going. I just said, "Oh, neat, lucky you," and he responds with, "How they have real metal jewelry there." I respond with something to the effect of how jealous I was, and the conversation died. A week later, he gives me a dragon necklace from the festival, saying he thought I'd like it. Thinking nothing of the intention behind it, I happily accept and start wearing it right away. He just smiles and goes on, like I said. I thought nothing of this gesture. It's probably worth mentioning that I didn't have any classes with him, but he had one weirdly with an underclassman girlfriend of mine, and he wrangled her into passing me a note one day, despite knowing it was from him, and her strong warning about why he'd probably give it to me. I opened it, and indeed, it was a love confession. Instantly, I felt bad, as I knew I wasn't interested at all, and quickly gathered that he might have taken my acceptance of the token as potential feelings. So I wrote a response, tucked the necklace inside, and handed it to him when I saw him next, which wasn't long afterwards. Seems he was following me to get a response. He seemed sad, but just nodded and left. If things had died there, it would have been one thing, but they didn't, clearly. Instead, he started to pop out outside of my classes and just stare at me. Not angry really, but his expression was strange. His lips were almost hard-set and determined, while his eyes seemed frustrated and disappointed. A few rare times he'd asked to walk with me, as opposed to just doing it, and I always declined, but he still stayed nearby like a nightclub bouncer. Things got so bad that a friend of mine who'd originally passed me the notes would point out when he was staring at me in the morning, only for me to flip out a little, and she'd haul me away with him still watching. It might be worth noting that he was easily on the taller side of the guys in our school. I was about 5'3", 5'4" at the time, and he towered over me and my friend, who was barely 5 foot. He had to be like 6'2" or something like that. Several months go by, and it's just 2 months before graduation. Our school has a cool tradition during April where underclassmen can rent seniors for a day and proceed to go to the school. Some get the seniors to dress up as a Batman and pull them around in a wagon, or other various things. Mark didn't get rented, but I did by my best friend, and dressed me up like a gothic rave baby doll. Pigtails, neon green, and black tights. Too much makeup, totally awesome way to pass the day. Anyways, it wasn't even first period yet, but she always hung out in the band hall, and lo and behold, who is marching determinedly down the hall? Ta-da, you guessed it, Mark! He stops in front of me and flat out demands to see my hand. I instantly refuse, and he only gets mad and keeps asking. Finally, I change my response to ask why. He just then repeats himself with a please, and I, hoping in truth for another note, give in. Instead, he gets on one knee and proceeds to make out with the top of my hand, kisses it, licks it, so gross, then wordlessly drops it and walks away with a huge smug smile on his face. I'm beyond freaking out and worried that he's going to get more aggressive, as my outfit was rather revealing too. Super short shorts with the stockings, and then I had combat boots on. But I took solace in that he didn't know my friend's schedule, as she goes about the normal day and I just follow her. If only. Instead, his lunch period was a match to hers, and he hangs near me when I wait for her in the main common area to finish getting lunch, starts asking me if I liked his kiss, and if I wanted to rethink about being his girlfriend. He hands me the necklace again and tells me to keep it, as it was meant for me. He wouldn't take it back either, just pushed it at me and told me to think about it. Maybe what I did next wasn't the nicest thing, but I was beyond dealing with him and called his name to watch me toss it in a nearby trash can. He stalked me, had no respect for my person and my lack of feelings for him, so I felt I had no choice. Finally, he seemed to break a bit, with his expression crumbling like a broken man before shooting a frown at me, while turning away. That was the last interaction we'd ever had before I finally moved away from the area some years. And even though it's been years, Mark, let's not meet again. It could have been one of us. This won't take very long, but all these stories seem to be in safer times. Mine is no different. I am a 25-year-old female. April 1997. I was 9 years old and my sister was 7, and my cousin was 12 years old and petite and teeny like us. We lived in Southern California, in a smaller valley town called Beaumont. My mom had always been a little strict with us kids around town, but where we could venture, it was a sunny day, and we had our older cousin with us, as long as we stayed off the main road because it was busy, and were home before the streetlights turned on. If we couldn't hear her whistle, we were too far from home. We were on our way to the video store to return one last movie and get another when my cousin decided we needed some candy for a two to 3 block trip. We went into the corner store and bought what we could with a couple dollars in change. We walk out and I start to head towards our usual alley route. She has other plans. How would your mom know if we took the main road instead? Plus it's shorter. She was our boss because she was watching us, so we had to stay with her. As we were walking down the main road, maybe right before the video store, my mom drives by. We're in big trouble. She tells us to go home now. Uh-oh. We take the main road home since we are already there and in trouble. Of course, we took our punishment of standing in the corner and writing sentences we disobeyed. A couple days go by and there's a news report that catches my mom's attention. A young boy, age 10, had been abducted from an alley in our small town. He was missing. This young boy's name was Anthony Martinez, and he was abducted in this very same alleyway that the 3 of us would have been walking. On the very same day, my cousin decided to take us on a detour to the main road. He was found a little over 2 weeks later in a shallow grave. He had been raped and murdered. I remember seeing the supposed killer's face, plastered everywhere. I saw billboards and posters on corners, but didn't really know what was going on. That sick man, armed with a knife, lured in that poor boy, with promises of money if he helped find his lost kitty. What three girls wouldn't help find a kitty? I would take our punishment 100 times over again now that I realized the magnitude of the situation and how it could have turned out. I'm so thankful we took the alternate route we did that day. If we didn't, it could have been one of us. The cars that followed us. Long-time lurker, first-time poster, typical I'm not a writer spiel. So earlier tonight, my friend asked me to come over to his house. I wasn't really doing anything, so I decided, hey, why not? I got there, my 2 friends Sid and Liam were there. After a while, Mike showed up there too. We're just sitting around killing time, and then eventually decided to go to Dunkin' Donuts. You may be wondering, why get Dunkin' at 9:45 at night? Well, I love double chocolate donuts and I was hungry. Anyways, after we got to Dunkin', I convinced my friends to go to train tracks by my house. I know now, that was probably a horrible idea at the time, but as bored high schoolers, anything semi-thrilling is a blast to us, especially at nighttime. Before I start telling the rest, I have to give you an idea on where the tracks are. It's inside a pretty dense forest, so driving around at night and seeing around corners is pretty hard. Over one of the roads to get into my neighborhood is a railroad bridge that's about 15 to 20 feet above the road. After you pull into my neighborhood, you take a right and then a left to get parallel with the railroad track. The track itself is on a big rock hill thing, again about 15 to 20 feet above the road. After going parallel along the railroad for about a quarter mile, you can either take a left to continue along the road, or left along a dirt road still parallel with the tracks. Then, after going along that road, you can either go left to my neighborhood, or right to get back along the dirt road again. Anyways, so my friend and I were driving into my neighborhood while we were around that area. This is where everything started to get a little weird. We saw a car going kind of slow by that corner, and slowly crept around it. We decided to drive around the corner and pull into the driveway to pretend that we lived there. We did this because we did not feel like letting people know we were planning on stopping by the tracks. After staying in the driveway for a few seconds, we noticed the car had passed us, stopped and turned around. I pulled out of the driveway and went the way it came, and went around 40 in a 25. I'd been reading Let's Not Meet earlier and was kind of creeped out for some reason by turning around. After getting a good head start on him, I slowed down. We were halfway through the stretch of the road when Liam noticed that the car we passed earlier was gaining on us and fast. I didn't think too much of it, but he started to flash his brights at me, which was very unsettling considering the circumstances. The neighborhood I live in is probably the tamest town in the States, and stuff like this rarely ever happens, so my friends and I were understandably bothered by this guy. We drove on while he tailgated us, and decided to go right back to the road, dirt road, instead of towards my house. I pulled around and saw this car slow down at the intersection, and then take a left. Boy, were we happy that ass finally relented. We went along the dirt road back around, since that was the only feasible way up there. We climbed up onto one of those metal things over train tracks with the red and green lights. Sid, however, was having none of it, and decided to sit in the car while we dicked around. After messing around on top of that, Liam, Mike, and I went to get Sid. We started walking down the railroad tracks, and about halfway there, we could hear that all too familiar sound of a train horn in the distance. That is when we decided to book it back to the car. The whole time we were running, all we could hear was the train horn getting louder and louder. And since after the bridge, the trains turned right. Wouldn't know if the train was close until it was very close. After what seemed like forever, we reached the path to get off the hill and to our car. Sid, Liam, and Mike all wanted to just go back to Sid's house and wait until later to go back. When we got back, Liam, Mike, and I were just talking about how cool it was up there and how we'd do it again in the future, and Sid was done with the train tracks for a while. After trying to convince him, we decided that we were just going to go back, and Sid stayed home. Mike, Liam, and I made it back to that same point with no incident, and decided to get to the bridge again. We made it there, just talked for about 10 minutes, then decided to head back. When we were almost there, we saw a truck pull around the corner that the car had come by, and like the car, slowed down around the corner. This was not a, "Oh, I'm not trying to crash slow." This is, "I'm looking for you" slow. Mike whispered to us to get down, and without hesitation, we dropped down and watched. We knew something was awry, because it stopped at that same point with its lights pointed in our directions. My car was parked down the road a bit, so I have no idea if the car was looking at us or at my car. Either way, it did the same thing as the car and turned around to head the other direction. We knew something was up, so instead of staying on the tracks for a bit longer, we decided to dip. The only way back was either through the dirt path or the way the truck went, and we didn't have much time because Liam had to be back by 11:30. I just decided to go the fastest way and follow where the truck went, and then through the dirt road to get to Mike, Sid, and Liam's neighborhood. We were all a little shaken up. I'd just been down this road earlier when we all went back to Sid's house, and though this night of adventure was going to be over, we reached the end of the road and saw two vehicles parked along the road. Strange, we thought, because they weren't there when we dropped Sid off. After passing them, I realized what they were. A car and a truck. The exact same two that had been at that corner. This is where I started to panic, because I knew something was up. I sped up and got to Sid's as fast as I could while not looking panicked, I guess. I dropped off Mike and Liam, and Mike offered to drop Liam off on his moped. I know that sounds strange, not realistic, but for some reason, Mike's family had a moped. I drove home and didn't bother going back on the dirt path and went around to a different route. For me, my night was over. For Mike, though, things were about to take a turn. About a half hour after getting home, I got a flurry of texts from Mike about what had just happened. Apparently, after dropping off Liam, he started to moped home when the truck from before started to follow him. He said at first he was far away, but then the truck came in very close to him and followed him towards his house. I have no idea why he thought to do what he did, but apparently he kept on driving past his house and lost him somehow, then walked his moped home. It was through the Snapchat texting thing, so unfortunately I don't have a reference. But he said when he got inside, he saw the truck just sitting outside of his neighbor's house. And after a few minutes, drove off. I have no idea who these people are or why they were following us, but weird stalkery car people. Let's not meet. The Tale of Zombie Locks. Longtime lurker, first-time poster, non-native speaker, please be nice. This happened last year in April when I was 22 years old. It was my best friend's birthday, and she decided to throw a horror-themed birthday party. Being the lazy tyke that I am, I didn't want to put too much effort into an elaborate costume. I decided to just go as a zombie. I wore an old pair of jeans and a t-shirt that I'd ripped and stained with fake blood, dabbed my face with grease paint, and simply didn't comb my hair that morning. Dead girl look in under 10 minutes and on a budget. The one accessory I did invest in, and that would bring me the entire costume together, were these black colored contacts that covered my entire eye. Not gonna lie, I chose to be a zombie, mainly to find an excuse to finally buy me a pair of those contacts. This was before I knew what a bitch it was to put those damn things in, let alone wear them for hours on end. I tried them out at home a few times before I got the hang of it, but I knew I wouldn't be able to wear them for too long. Definitely not all night. Fast forward to the party. I'm running around all zombie field and knocking back drinks when I notice that my eyes are kind of starting to sting, and I'm thinking it's probably time to take the contacts out. Regardless of how awesome they look, I go through my bag and come to the conclusion that I am an idiot who didn't bring her contact container or the storage solution. Now I can't just take them out because I have nowhere to put them, and don't want to mess them up because they were rather expensive, and so I would want to wear them again. So I tough it out for another hour, thinking I make my eyes hurt less by switching to whiskey, but at around 1 a.m., I have to call it quits and head home, because now my eyes and my insides are burning. So I'm stumbling around outside all by myself in the middle of the night, in a completely deserted part of town. I am dressed up, I have fake blood smeared on my throat, and I am way more drunk than I anticipated being. That's when I got to the bus stop. It's a good 30-minute walk from my current location to my house, 40 minutes when drunk, but I'm not feeling up for it, and decided to take the bus. According to the schedule, the next bus should arrive in about 10 minutes or so I plopped down on the bench, wrapped myself in my hoodie, and let my spinning head rest against the glass wall of the bus stop, praying to every deity I know not to let me fall asleep out here. And it's a few minutes later when I hear voices approaching. It's not a very well lit area, so when I look up, all I see are 3 shadows coming towards me from the end of the street. The voices are male and obviously drunk, but who am I to judge? It does kind of make me nervous because I'm a smallish blonde girl all alone at an isolated bus stop, and I'm no good with strangers even when I'm sober. So I pull my hood down over my face and hope they'll pass me by. Obviously, that's not what happened. As soon as they spot me, their entire demeanor changes. Before, they were just walking along and being kind of loud, but when they see a small figure huddled in the corner of the bus stop, with blonde curls peeking out from under a hood, I can feel them zone in on me and I freeze to the bench. They start calling out to me, calling me baby and sweetie, and asking if I need them to keep me warm. When I didn't reply, they just called out louder, coming towards me and effectively locking me in the corner of the bus stop. They keep asking me what I'm doing out at this hour. The comments get more and more obscene, and they keep coming closer and closer to me. One of them actually says something that hints towards rape, and they all laugh like it's the funniest thing in the world. And I'm about ready to cry now. And then one reaches out and brushes a hand along my cheek, and hooks a finger into the collar of my hoodie, as if he's trying to push the zipper down or peek inside. This is where I flip my shit. No matter how humiliated or petrified I feel, the second I actually feel him touch me, the alcohol in my brain gets lit on fire, and I'm just so incredibly pissed off that I do the first thing that comes to my mind. I hiss at the guy. Purge snaps his hand back and goes, "What the fuck?" And I finally remember what I look like, so I tilt my head back so they can see the black eyes and the bloody throat. I let out the most god-awful, guttural moaning sound. They start backing up, and I decide to play it out. I channel every zombie movie I've ever seen in my whole entire life, and slowly pull myself off of the bench, baring my teeth, and generally act like my cat right before he pounces on a ball of tinfoil. I'm not sure if the creep believes I'm actually a member of the undead, or just a crazy homeless chick with a bad eye infection, but something about the hissing and the blood, and the weird way I'm now taking a few steps towards them convinces them they don't want to find out, and they take off. I'm now standing in the middle of the road, and watch them go, and they keep looking over their shoulder, slow down, then stop. and I'm so full of adrenaline. I have this strange, burning cocktail of fear and anger in the pit of my stomach from being cornered like that I just take off in a dead sprint towards them. I don't know what my plan would have been if they had stood their ground. But luckily for me, seeing my crazy ass booking it down a dark road is enough to send them running in the other direction without looking back, so I hobble back to my bench. And a few minutes later, the bus finally pulls up. By now, I'm shivering and on the verge of tears again. The bus driver doesn't even bat an eye at my costume. He has obviously seen weirder shit in his time. I take a seat next to the door and get off one stop early to puke in someone's front yard. When I get home, I finally take the goddamn contacts out and crawled into bed without even taking a shower. Fake blood and grease paint all over my sheets, and I'm too tired to care. Sad little zombie can't deal with the world for the next 12 hours. My friends love this story because when I tell it, I usually put a heavy emphasis on making it all sound funny and heroic, but it wasn't that much fun, to be honest. I've never felt more helpless and claustrophobic than when I was trapped in the corner of that bus stop by 3 people who were getting an absolute kick of making me feel small and cheap and alone. I know this is by far the scariest story on here, but it's my only Let's Not Me moment, and honestly, I'm glad there's all there is to it. It's been a little over a year now, and I still walk home alone at night, even though I'm constantly on edge when I do, but I still do it because I can. I get so pissed when people tell me, just don't go outside by yourself at night, and these things won't happen. If anyone should be kept inside, it's assholes like those bus stop creeps. I won't hide under my bed out of fear of what some drunk jackass might try to do to me. I should be able to walk home without feeling like I'm an open invitation for rape jokes. Ladies and gentlemen, please remember, if you can't carry pepper spray, batshit crazy works just as well. It is perfectly legal to out-creep the creeps. Guys in a forest. I was working in the Czech Republic at kids' summer camps when I was 20 years old. It was nothing like the American summer camps I've seen on TV, much more relaxed. We own a huge cabin in the forest, just outside a small town. There are walking tracks around and people would walk past our cabin and field area from time to time. One day I was doing some craft with a small group of children at a table that can be seen from the walking tracks when this guy walks past. He's alone, about 30, had dreads, heavy boots, these patchwork pants on, and a loose metal singlet. He stops mid-walk when we spots and starts to approach. He asks me in Czech if I have any cigarettes. I tell him in Czech I'm sorry, I don't speak Czech very well, in an attempt for him to give up and leave. I'm trying to be nice because I have 5 kids sitting at the table and I don't want to scare them. He then switches to English and I'm like, fuck. It was a 50-50 chance he wouldn't speak English in a part of the country like this. He then comments on my tattoos, asking me all this stuff, says he's getting a new one, asks about the cigarettes again. I say no and was being polite about the tattoos, but not encouraging conversation. He asks my name, I tell him, and he keeps talking for a little bit. After a while, he moves on. I sigh with relief and the day continues. Later that afternoon, it was around 6, still light, and we were killing time before dinner being served. I was in the field outside the cabin with some kids running around. Other leaders were doing various activities with the kids, when all of a sudden, another leader got my attention and told me to get the kids inside. I look up and on either side of the field, where the trees start, there's a guy, all dressed similar to the guy earlier, standing just back from the tree line. They had spread out and approached from different angles. Then I hear someone shouting my name. We move all the kids inside and lock the doors. The 3 male leaders we have go out and talk to the guys in the forest surrounding our cabin. I can hear them. The guys say, "We were hunting for deer. Thought we saw it come through this way. Anyways, I'm a friend," and says my name. And I start freaking out. What the fuck is this guy? It's the guy from the morning. I want to show her my new tattoo. Confused, the leaders come back and are like, who's this guy? They know I'm not Czech, and I don't know many people outside of our circle, so it's odd. I tell them about the morning, and I don't want to see him again. They go back out and tell the guys to leave. After some fuss and yelling out for me again, they leave. The rest of the trip, I was paranoid they'd come back, especially at night. Luckily, they didn't. So, creepy guys in the forest, let's not meet again. I hope we meet again. In accordance to the sub's new rules, here's a let's meet. I used to live on campus when I was 19. I was at uni, studying away and trying to rid my mind of rampant gay thoughts, female, and trying to make friends. I made a lot of friends, mostly other teenage girls, but one of them was special. The first night we met, she gave me a Carlton Blue and passed me a lollipop with her hands. I was profoundly disappointed, but at least it had been in her mouth, right? We hung out all that night. I walked her home, she walked me home, we watched a movie, I walked her home again. I tried not to touch women too much, just in case they get weirded out by it, but she held my hand. I never held hands before, not since lining up in primary school. She'd invite herself over and sit on my bed and watch me do my assignments. Then I'd join her and we watched a movie. She'd spoon me from behind, her hand resting on my ribs, her thumb just brushing the underside of my boob. My hair being blown with her breath, twice a week, torture. The first time we kissed wasn't terribly romantic. She was drunk, I was drunk, she wasn't drunk. I met her arguing with campus security downstairs. She'd thrown a bottle out a window because she was locked outside. That's the story I heard. When they took her to her room, there were lines on her desk, meth. I think she liked, at that point. I took her off their hands, unknowing, as she poured me a lot of vodka. I was already half a bottle of whiskey drunk, what did I know? I went with her to her room only to see her desk, and the paraphernalia on it. I brushed it off her desk and told her she was an idiot. I asked her to get help. Even in my messed up states, I offered to go to NA with her. My father was an addict. I thought I knew something. I'm not sure how it happened, but we ended up kissing in her wardrobe. Romantic, right? Real really set a precedent for a relationship too, closeted. I woke up with more hickeys than clothes, tugged on some pants and went home. They were her pants, and her keys in the pocket. I went back and fell asleep in her bed. In the morning she was freaked out and I just felt so ill I didn't care. I thought we had something, but we obviously didn't from what she was saying as she stroked my hair. It went on in secret like this for a while, 2 steps back, 1 step forward. We managed our trice. On holidays when the unit was empty, we pushed the couches together in the lounge room and lived there on vampire movies. Then someone said something and she had to be above suspicion. She got herself a boyfriend who gave her heroin. I was her next of kin. I'd taken her to the hospital before. I know the drill. Grab a cushion and some food and start the car. The night I called the ambulance, she was blue. I followed in my car. They wouldn't let me in, despite being next of kin. And at the time I thought it was a same-sex policy, but looking back on it now, it was probably to do with drugs rather than gender. She was in a coma for a while, I think. They had me pretty well sedated in the waiting room. Those cuffs, fabric, cuffs, those two. At some point they came out with her belongings in a see-through bag and I thought she was dead. I stayed there 2 days. I didn't eat, I didn't sleep, I smoked all her cigarettes. I waited until she was recovered before ending it. She was never a faithful creature and I knew she'd been around behind my back as well. Final straw if you're a camel. We still lived on campus. We still saw each other. No one thought it was strange that we saw each other less. I made out with literally all but 2 of those female friends I'd made, so that was nice. I remember making out with this girl I had liked all year in the common room against the window, opening my eyes just a moment and making eye contact with her on the other side of the window. Quantifying. I moved off campus soon after, finished my degree, got a job. I went to the Pride Parade a year after, and she was there with her girlfriend, out in public, out and proud. After all the running around we did, her girlfriend offered to carry me on her shoulders as, "You're tiny, I work out, and it's not like I just want to get my head between your legs." Again, quantifying. I went to her birthday at the gay bar that year, just me, her, and her girlfriend. It should have been awkward. We texted on and off for a few years. I ran into her every now and then I changed my number without telling her. I was getting next of kin calls from the hospital now and then. I directed them to her brother. The last message I have from her was on my birthday, 2009. I wish I told her my new number. I wish I had the courage to ask her brother how she was, if she's still alive. I can't find her on social media or her profession. I know she graduated in 2009, but other than that, she might as well not have existed. She's a ghost, and she's haunting me. I worry so much that she had too much of something one night. At least when I got the next of kin calls, I knew she was briefly alive. I was, for a period, responsible for her life, which was frequently in danger. You don't give up that at the drop of a hat. So, Lean, please, let's meet again. Let me check your elbows for punctures. Let me smell your breath. Let me know you're still alive. Don't pull over. I'm an American-born woman, but my mother was born in South Africa, having immigrated in the 90s. Growing up, she always taught me to be on guard and to be extremely cautious. It was simple things, like driving up to an ATM at nighttime while my mom was using the machine. I had to look out one of the windows while my sister would look out the other so that we could see if someone was coming. I had always wanted to visit South Africa, and when I was 17 years old, it went as a graduation present. I ended up staying with my grandparents, who were both in their late 70s. My grandmother was hell-bent on showing me as much of the country as possible, even though my grandfather's Alzheimer's was worsening and traveling was become harder. Regardless, we took off from Johannesburg towards Cape Town. We would drive up for 6 hours at a time. Anyone who has been to South Africa knows they can go hundreds of miles and see nothing but grass. It was incredibly beautiful, but eerie. Once we drove into wine country in the Cape, we began passing signs that said, "Don't pull over for people selling grapes," as we were near vineyards, and people would steal grapes and then sell them on the side of the road. Around hour 3 or 4 of the day, my grandfather was getting antsy. He was obsessing with the GPS of the car, plugging it and unplugging it, cursing and getting frustrated. Eventually, the thing just kept repeating, recalculating for hours on end. My patience was wearing thin, and I was trying to take it from him so I could fix it, but he would not let me touch it. Finally, my grandmother had enough and pulled over. This stretch of road was narrow and lined by trees. It was probably mid-afternoon, but we were the only ones in sight, and it was silent. Only our car there. My grandparents were reading the GPS instructions and arguing, when my grandmother turns around. "Keep watch out the back window." I kind of smiled to myself, remembering what my mom used to say to me. I glanced at my phone, which had no service, and scrolled through my camera roll for like the 300th time that day. I casually looked up and towards the back window, and my heart stopped. A man had come out of the forest and was running, full sprint at our car. I found my voice and yelled, "Go!" to my grandmother, and her instincts kicked in and we took off. We drove away, and the man was just left there standing. My grandmother explained that often, when travelers pulled over for the grape sellers, there would be people waiting in the trees who would come out and rob you, sometimes violently. It doesn't get much more vulnerable than a teenage girl and an elderly couple, one of which was obviously suffering with Alzheimer's. Thank you, Mom, for making me cautious. So, man running at us from the forest. Let's not meet.